I want to remind you of how police work. When somebody tries to rob a bank, the police gets in, they don't negotiate, and we've been negotiating with them for 65 years. We say, get out or you're dead. We give them 2 minutes, and then we start shooting.
You notice a couple of token Jews. That is so offensive. You find a couple of useful idiots who dress in this caricature of what the anti-Semite thinks a Jewish person looks like. They represent nobody at all. But this is very interesting stuff, what you just heard. The Marissa Semkiw, producer on our show, The Arena, you covered the Al-Quds parade, Hate Fest, whatever it is. What we just heard there, I know that man, Elias Hazineh. What he said, he was calling on people to shoot and kill Israeli Jews, was he not?
Yes, he was calling for the incitement of hate and sort of the destruction of Jews. And of course, there have been a number of people that have called, that have wondered whether or not what he said would constitute a violation of Canada's criminal code, and whether or not what he said constitutes hate propaganda.
Was he head of Palestine House at one point?
He was the former head of the Palestine House. And so, yeah, he's essentially calling for the hate and destruction of Israel. Now, with respect to whether or not this constitutes hate propaganda, I think that it probably does.
So an investigation will be required.
But yeah, well, the question is whether or not, you know, is it better to shine light on this issue or to silence it with criminal provisions? So
he's not a minor player. He was a high-ranking official for the Liberal, to a Liberal MP. He was. And we're going to talk about this more, I think, in the coming days. The Liberal Party, I believe, has to respond in some way too, because he worked directly for a Liberal MP. He's not a Muslim, by the way. He's not a nominal Christian. He's an Israeli-Palestinian Christian. But Hezbollah flags, speaking of legality, Hezbollah is a banned organization in this country.
Hezbollah is a terrorist organization in this country. And while what this man said, I suspect, was did constitute hate speech, there were more incendiary things that occurred, perhaps just the waving of Hezbollah flags. So we do have a clip
clips of Hezbollah flags and your courageous confrontation. Do we have something there, please?
Ma'am, are you a member of Hezbollah? Shut up. Are you a member of Hezbollah?
No! Can you please leave me alone?
That is a Hezbollah flag.
Stop provoking her and leave her alone.
You know, I've covered these things before. It's amazing how aggressive people, they think they can wave terrorist flags. They can scream and shout and call for violence. If you ask them a civilized question politely, they get very angry with you.
I think it was a very civilized question. If someone came up to me and asked me why I was carrying a Canadian flag, I would respond and say, well, it's because I'm Canadian. Thing is I don't think I was being provocative by asking her that question. I think she was being provocative by carrying or by wearing the Hezbollah flag. And the interesting thing is that quite a few people at this rally did not think that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. We do have another clip of a man saying just that. Let's take a look at it quickly.
Please.
You think the Zionists are a terrorist organization, sir?
It is, yes, it is. It's a racist organization and it's a terrorist organization.
Do you think that Hezbollah and Hamas are terrorist organizations?
No, they are not.
Even though Canada has recognized them as so?
Because the Canadians are following, because the Zionists in Canada, unfortunately, has got control of Canadian government, especially Stephen Harper, unfortunately.
He had a very interesting way of speaking, didn't he?
And I couldn't. His accent was curious. He wasn't an Arab, I don't think.
I'm not.
No,
it's very hard to distinguish between all.
Well, the inflection, what didn't sound Arabic to me, it hardly even sounded Middle Eastern. But so he thinks that Zionists, that's the majority of the world's Jews, and probably most evangelical Christians, and all sorts of, they're all terrorists. But those who smash the skulls of Israeli children until their brains come out, as Hezbollah have done, they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting. These people at the protests, these ralliers, were basically calling for peace. They want Jews and Palestinians to live in harmony. When I asked them about whether or not they wanted a one-state or a two-state solution, it was always, oh, well, we want a one-state solution. We want Jews and Palestinians to live peacefully together, presumably under Islamic law. But I think, you know, their sentiment sort of rings hollow in light of the recent rhetoric we've been hearing about, you know, killing of Jews and Zionists being terrorists. And
they've also become so radicalized. There's certainly a cogent and in some ways compelling argument for a two-state solution, and Palestinians have not been treated properly by most countries in the region. They've been treated terribly in Lebanon, Syria, and so on, and also in parts of Israel as well. I would acknowledge that. But now, I mean, this was a Shia Muslim, mainly Iranian Front parade. Sunni Muslims generally boycotted it because they know how they're treated. And by the way, Shia Muslims in Gaza are not tolerated at all. It's a Sunni enclave. I mean, most people have no idea. A lot of them are from Pakistan. They couldn't even tell you where Israel was on the map, but they've been told to. Now, there's another clip which I think this is absolutely central to what we're discussing, because they talk about 1967 borders.
And the 1948 borders.
Exactly. Well, the Jewish state was re-established. The rebirth was in 1948.
Yes.
Immediately, it was given statehood by the United Nations. 7 or 8 different Arab nations invaded. The war of attrition, 56, it went on and on and on. They don't want 1967 borders. They want the Jews to go.
Yeah, no one should be fooled that this rally was just about reclaiming the West Bank. It's absolutely, you heard chants from the river to the sea. That means the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. They're talking about all of Jerusalem. They're talking about all of Israel. They want that back. The original pre-1948 borders, which was just Palestine. So let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
When do you think the occupation began? In 1967 or in 1948?
1948.
48.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. 1967?
1967?
Yeah, about that.
Okay. Okay. Now, Zafar Bagash has said that the occupation began in 1948. How would you respond?
I believe that. I'm sorry. He's right. 1948, yes.
Now, I've got to tell you, my wife is South Asian family. He was South Asian. He was either Indian or Pakistani. If he was Pakistani, what that country has done in terms of occupying other parts of the world and oppression and so on, he doesn't know. He doesn't understand the Middle East. If you're a Palestinian, you deserve a voice. I want to hear about, because you may have suffered. These they come from another entirely different part of the world. It's Islamic lunacy that is fueling their hatred, and not any struggling in the Middle East.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting too, is we saw quite a few, some rabbis there. There were people from...
There were 2 rabbis from a fringe fanatical group that is self-loathing and hates other Jews and all Israelis. They are no more representative than a couple of black stooges who would cheer for apartheid.
I think that you're probably right. There were, I wouldn't say that this is a majority of people in Canada that feel this way, but this is certainly Islamic extremism, and it definitely is prevalent in Canada.
How were you treated? Because they like to say you're either a Jew or you're in the pay of the Jews. I'm apparently both, which is fine as long as the pay is okay. But how did they treat you? Because you're very blonde and blue-eyed, I think.
Well, actually, I was attacked personally. I was told that I was ugly. I need to put on more makeup. I was,
Really?
My microphone was hit. Our cameras were hit.
Really?
They criticized me for being blonde, for wearing a white dress. We don't have clips of that, unfortunately. Maybe next time. But
Well, thank you, you ugly person, for your time on the show. I really appreciate it. Well done.
Thank you.